let's just welcome that jolly old chap named Robert Pattinson. Okay, first of all, I have to say, again, I do these Q&As, I moderate Q&As, I'm a producer for Access Hollywood, and I'm a reviewer for Access Hollywood, and this is one mighty intense movie, and I'd like to ask, starting with you, David, tell me why this was your follow-up to Animal Kingdom.
Thanks for coming, I spent quite a lot of time after Animal Kingdom came out, and it felt like my life had turned upside down, trying to work out what to do next. You know, and I felt like I had a lot of stuff to wade through, a lot of not just projects, but possibilities, different ways of working. Blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I came back to, I found myself after like a lot of doing a million meetings and reading a lot of screenplays that I knew I wasn't going to make. Coming back to the idea, really being attracted to the idea of making the Rover, because I knew I wanted to, it would allow me the opportunity to play in a similar sort of tonal world to the world of Animal Kingdom, a kind of brooding menace, but it offered me the opportunity to do something that was very different on a formal level, whereas Animal Kingdom is a big sort of a dense urban fabric, and almost a kind of slightly heightened social realist crime drama. I just loved how it's simple and elemental, and almost like a kind of dark, violent fable this movie was, and that it was, instead of that dense fabric, it was just a couple of characters having a really intensely intimate relationship in a vast, empty, hostile landscape.
Well, tell me why, I think I read one of the articles out of Cannes, how this story sort of came out of a feeling of frustration, a feeling of anger that you had at the time, and you channeled that into the story.
I mean, yeah, as I was drafting it later, and I started redrafting it, this wasn't long after the economic crisis. I did just find, at a certain point in my life, that I was carrying around this weird feeling of despair and or anger. Maybe it's just me and I'm getting older or whatever, but this was not long after the economic crisis. It would seem that we had just willingly surrendered the world to psychopaths in suits, while simultaneously just throwing the towel in on what is arguably the greatest moral challenge of our time, which is addressing climate change. And I just found myself waking up in the morning going, yeah, what's the point? That's a bit glib. It was an actual kind of despair that for the first time since I was a little kid, in a way, I actually found myself not thinking about the future as a good place, And I started funneling that despair and that anger into the world of the movie, whatever this kind of near future is, and funneling the anger especially into Guy's character.
Definitely. Well, Guy Pearce, who you work with on Animal Kingdom, he was terrific, exceptionally terrific as Eric. And just tell me what it was like to work with him again. And I understand that you actually wrote the role for him.
Yeah, I really love working with Guy. He's a really, just as an actor, he's so beautifully, supremely talented. That he offers. He's a pleasure to direct, because he offers the director, the opportunity to perform the tiniest little microsurgical adjustments on a performance. I never have to feel like I'm painting in broad brush strokes with him. Like, we can get right in there, and I never have to feel like I have to pussyfoot around him either. Quite often when you're learning how to direct actors, it gets drilled into you that there are certain things you have to play, kind of very simple, sort of playable actions. It's got to, you've got to talk in transitive verbs and all this kind of stuff. And with Guy, it's like you don't have to do that. You just talk about life, he gets what you're talking about, then he goes away and very quickly makes it playable for himself. But more than anything, in this movie, I really wanted him... Guy does that. He's so good at doing that really still, powerful, that really kind of powerful and often intimidating stillness that he can also just fill with like very subtle emotional detail. And this character really needed it. You know, you don't know a lot about this guy, but over the course of the film, I think it was important to me that you just slowly get clear hints at the degrees and types of his emotional damage.
You know, I read a review, Rob, that said, and I quote, regarding the Rover, Robert Pattinson is a revelation. You know who wrote that review? I do. Well, you know, Rob, I want to ask you, how did this project come about for you, and why did you just see it as just a really great challenge to do something completely different?
I'd seen the teaser trailer for Animal Kingdom years ago, and wanted to meet David from that, because I just thought it was just what you could pack it on with the air supply someone, and just in 60 seconds you could kind of tell immediately that was someone I want to work with, and I think Animal Kingdom is like one of the best David movies in the last 10 years or something. I also think one of the opening shot of Crossbow is probably one of the best shots in the history of cinema, which I haven't told you before.
It's a shot of a bush. I don't think you think of the first shot.
No, it's very good. Landing on the crack.
Yeah.
And yeah, the script came along. I met David about a year before I got the script, and then read it and thought it was kind of mind-blowing. And it's incredibly original and sort of vicious. I thought it was strangely funny as well. No one else seems to.
I think it. I mean, I get where you're coming from. But in terms of like the look of your character, the shaved head, or the buzz cut rather, and the teeth. I mean, is that something that was sort of laid out for the character, or did you? What else did you bring other than what was written on the page?
I don't even think there was a character description, right? It was just saying from the sound. But yeah, I don't think there was anything. I don't know. I saw these photos of a bunch of guys, kind of sort of white, trashy looking guys. There's a few. I mean, that was kind of, it was quite a popular haircut.
It still is.
It's annoying. It's like, yeah, no, I think it's kind of trendy now, which is annoying. That's why I put the mange on it after.
Well, what about working with Guy? I mean, he's really intense in this movie, and I mean, all the two of you together basically the entire time, and that's almost it, other than the people that you got to shoot. So, what was it like just spending all that time with him, and what sort of pick up from him as an actor?
I mean, he's a lovely person. It kind of makes it easier. But I don't know. His part is really, really difficult. I mean, it's basically like a constant force. I mean, there's never any, well, very, very rarely a time when his pressure lets up. And I don't quite know how he was doing it, so I don't really know what I learned. I just learned that it's possible. But yeah, you could really feel, even when we're just sitting in silence in the car, he's still sort of radiating. There's a sort of vibration, and you can kind of feel it, and it kind of provokes tons of reactions.
I sure did love dogs. I want to ask you, David, the intensity. I have not heard or read one reaction from this movie where the word intense was not mentioned in a good way, because I mean that's really just to maintain that for the duration of the film. So I understand that you're a fan of John Carpenter, and I was wondering if the work of John Carpenter has inspired you, not just with Animal Kingdom, but with the Rover as well.
Not really. I mean, I really like John Carpenter. No, that has never. And I'm sure I absorb everything that I've ever seen by osmosis somehow. But no, I don't. No. I don't think it ever. There's never been a moment when John Carpenter has entered my thinking on either of his movies.
Well, it's been a while.
Yeah.
I want to ask you too. Listen, obviously, as Angelinos, when it gets hot in LA and it's 100 degrees, yeah, people say, oh, it's dry heat, but it's still pretty damn hot. And when you walk outside and get in your car and it says 108 degrees, you go, damn, that's hot. But where you guys shot this movie, it got well over 110 degrees.
It was like 122.
122 is the number. So what was it like filming for, what, 2 months in those conditions?
It was kind of weirdly okay. I actually think it was about 123 the week before before we started shooting, we did our tech recce. It was like 123, but it was like 50 degrees Celsius, and it was scary. It was so hot. I mean, we knew we couldn't work in it. It felt dangerous. But it's amazing what just the drop down, when it drops down to, say 115, 116, it suddenly feels like a cool change. And if you've got water to drink and some shade to stand under, it's okay. It's desert heat, Give me that over humidity, anything.
And also the flies. I mean, the flies just look like just were relentless, But that really does add to the character. It does add to the vibe, and ultimately, it made for a better film, I think. It's like almost like any kind of movie you make under diversity. Out of that diversity and adversity comes a work of art. So, congrats on that. But I also want to ask you just the reactions you've gotten from when the movie premiered in Cannes, and it's really just getting a very strong reaction. And why do you think people are just really taken so much with the movie and they just love it so much? And especially Rob, I mean, the reviews you've gotten in particular have been just great. So that's got to be a good feeling for you.
Yeah. I mean, annoyingly, you always just tend to seek out the bad ones anyway, the good ones. And your one obviously will stay in my heart for the rest of my life. But no, it's great. It's kind of, but you just, it's more about the experience. I mean, the experience, and also just when you see something on the page which you love so much right from the beginning, I think most of the time you're just thinking, I just don't want to mess it up. And so when you can watch the movie and you feel like you kind of haven't totally messed it up, then that's about what I'm trying to aim for. And the rest of it's just a bonus.
Well, I'd like to open questions up to the audience. If you got questions, please raise your hand. And sir, you, in the blue shirt, yeah, nice and loud, please.
I was wondering about the music. It's a really eclectic mix of songs that used throughout it. I just want to know where the inspiration for those choices.
The inspiration for the score and the music. It was very eclectic.
Yeah, weird. It was, when I'm writing especially, I start building playlists. I can't write with music playing, but it's just, over however many months I'm writing, I'm just constantly thinking about the world of the movie that I'm inventing, and we'll just be building playlists. And those playlists get really long. And sometimes they even involve me diving down, like I go down sort of 7-hour iTunes rabbit holes, listeners who bought this also like this, and you follow that for like 7 hours, you get to some pretty interesting places. And in the course of that, I discovered some people that I really, really loved, like Colin Stetson, who does all of that strange saxophone stuff in there, or William Basinski, who's this beautiful pianist composer who does these kind of long piano loops that sort of fall apart, and then compositions by a guy named Giacinto Celsi, which is beautiful string stuff, but principally that just feels like metal grating against metal. And what I did find was that because it's setting a movie that's a few decades in the future, I didn't want to have to try and make the soundtrack futuristic. I actually really loved the idea of taking very traditional instruments, but ones that were being performed in very unusual ways, and yeah, that seemed to do the trick. And then Anthony Partos, who I worked with on Animal Kingdom, just sort of gave me some of the connecting tissue.
Who's got a question? You, young lady. Nice and loud.
Sure. You mentioned dogs, and it did feel kind of dog-centric. At the beginning, when Eric kind of showed his humanity by, in the end, having the dog, and really wanting the dog, and then the killing of the gentleman who sold him the gun, he felt like he would use the dog, and then what else? With sitting there with
Interesting, interesting. Question was, did Ray sort of become Eric's lost puppy in a way, right?
Yeah, without the dog team kind of running.
Right, okay, that's a, wow, you really read into this.
I think that's a perfectly reasonable reading.
Wow, good call. Here's what I said. I interviewed these gentlemen this afternoon. I said, wait a minute, so I get why it's called the Rover, but is it also called the Rover because Rover is a common dog name? And they're like, well, yeah. And I'm like, oh, I thought I was onto something here. Who else has a question? Yes, you, Bond.
Question is for Rob. I wanted to know how difficult was it for you to have a Southern accent, and how did you prepare for that Southern accent?
How difficult was it for you, Rob, to have a Southern accent? What did you do to prepare?
I'm not entirely sure what accent I'm doing. I never prepared for it that much either. And also I was surrounded by a bunch of Australians, so no one could tell anyway. But yeah, I think it was kind of it was on the page. It was a fun. The Southern accent's fun, and, kind of, especially when you can add little quirks to it and stuff. But yeah, when Scoot turned up, I was terrified that he was just going to be thinking, what is that?
Who's next? You, young lady.
For either or both of you, what was your favorite scene to shoot and why?
What was your favorite scene to shoot and why?
For me, it's, it's kind of, as this is really boring, but for me, it's like, the long campfire scene. I mean, that for me is the thrill of making movies. It's just having kind of created two characters, and then you get great actors that bring them to life, and then you have that long night where we just made it work. That for me is thrilling. That's massaging performances and watching a thing that has been in gestation for a long time finally come into being.
Who is next? You, sir. Nice and loud.
You have a lot of long duration takes. You hold a camera for a lot of long shots. Do you do was there a lot of preparation for that? Or, like, how do you just let the camera roll, especially that opening shot with the guy in the car? Like, when do you know what's the starting point, the end point, and when do you feel that shot is complete?
The kind of preparation you did for some of the long shots that just stayed on the characters for a while.
Yeah, I mean, you always allow yourself wiggle room. You always should shoot more than you need. I mean, it's always very important to me that those couple of opening shots be long. A, because I wanted to get a sense of the kind of guy's strange stagnation. The what's that word? Doesn't matter. That whatever, that this is, that his atrophy or whatever, that this man had, he could barely find reason to move anymore. But I also, to prepare I knew I'm about to give the audience a big car chase. I want to prepare them at the outset. I want them to know that that's not going to be, this isn't going to be a car chase movie. But once that car chase is out of the way, it's going to slow right down.
Actually, I have a question about, so you filmed this like way out in the boonies of the Australian outback. And, okay, so you're filming during the day, it's hot. Okay, night, you lose the light. You shot there for 2 months. What you guys do at night?
Just looking at stuff.
You mentioned today that you saw, that just looking up in the sky was a big deal.
Yeah, because there's no ozone.
See the stars.
You're so far from city lights. I totally forgot as well. I didn't get to do this, but our armourer had night vision goggles. And apparently when you're out there and you put night vision goggles on and you look up at the sky, it's like, it's awe-inspiring. I mean, it's like literally just the sky is a blanket of stars.
That was worth it right there. Who's next? Yes, you.
I have a question for Rob. How long does it take you to learn your lines? And do you do it with the accent you have in mind?
Say that again, I'm sorry?
How long does it take you to memorize your lines, and do you do it with the accent already in mind?
How long does it take you to memorize your lines?
With this, I had an accent, most of the voice quite almost immediately of reading it. But yeah, it takes me, as I get older, for some reason, I just can't remember anything. So I need to do it in an incredibly OCD way. I have like a very specific way of running them, and I have to run them and run them and run them and run them and run them. It's ridiculous. Thousands of times.
Who is next? Got time for a couple more questions. Sarah, you? Yes, nice and loud.
Did you always know where the story would end, or was that discovered in the writing?
You mean with the dog?
Or in general?
In general, I mean, with the dog, the key character kind of forming this bond and then that being separate.
I can't remember how it... I know the dog happened really early on in the process, because I knew that at a certain point it became apparent to me that what I was writing was a sort of dark, violent fable, and so in that context it felt entirely reasonable and appropriate that it have a kind of strangely round, sentimental ending. Having said that, you know, that ending with the dog for me is just like it's like a coda or an epilogue. It's not really the conclusion. I never particularly wanted it to feel like a twist or you know, a hard conclusion. I always wanted it just to be a final little piece of Guy's emotional jigsaw puzzle. You know, that this is. So you can go right back to the very first shot of the movie and have some sense as to what he might have been sitting in his car contemplating. But for me, the movie actually technically ends before the dog. It's, you know, it's him looking at a mess he's made, a mess of bodies. Everywhere he goes, he makes a mess, and everywhere he goes, he thinks it somehow. He probably has for, you know, a decade thought that mess was somebody else's fault. And for the first time ever, he has that moment of realizing that this is a mess entirely of his creation, and for the first time ever, he cleans it up with a certain reverence and ceremony.
Time for one more question. Let's make it a good one. You, right in the front row.
Hi, this question is for both of you. Which scene was most challenging for you both to film?
Which scene was most challenging to film? From the beginning to the ending credits.
This is a kind of boring answer, but you know, the car chase is just because it's boring to shoot. I love fooling around with actors and all that kind of stuff. And as soon as you're doing a car chase, you're only doing, you know, maybe on a normal day, if you're moving well, you get somewhere between, you know, 12 and 16 shots per day, and as soon as you start shooting a car chase, you're doing 4 shots a day, and it's just so tedious and mechanical. And as soon as your actors are in the car doing anything, having to act in any way, I'm not getting to kind of go and whisper to them and stuff. I'm just screaming at them through a walkie-talkie. Yeah, I mean, it's fun when you finally get to put it all together in an edit room, and then even funner when you get into the world of sound. But when you're actually shooting it, it's just up and down the road, up and down the road, for days and days and days.
But a movie like The Rover, you know, we're in the summer season, it's all about superheroes and spaceships. But a movie like The Rover, the way for the word to get out there is by word of mouth. And what is word of mouth in today's day and age? It's social media. So the movie's in select theaters now. It opens nationwide next weekend. So make sure you get on Facebook, you get on Twitter. I don't know if you're still using MySpace or Friendster, but please do get the word out. Gentlemen, thank you so much for this Q&A, and thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed the movie. Thank you.
I need him to tape it.